Today we're going to take a look at the insect that isn't, Folsomia candida, the springtail. As you can see from the footage, Folsomia candida is quite small, actually, and it only reaches about a millimeter in length. This organism, like many organisms, is the source of a lot of distress for gardeners. Though it's actually quite beneficial, I can understand why somebody might see these sort of organisms and find them quite alarming. They're small, white, and they're everywhere. Usually, that's a sign of an infestation. So you can excuse people for being a little bit cautious and skeptic when they find these organisms roaming around in their soil, especially if their plants aren't doing so well. But actually, they make the soil much more bearable for many plants. It's funny, they serve a similar purpose as many fungus and mushrooms that you might find in your potted soil, even if it's a mystery fungus. So, like I've said before, Folsomia candida is Class Entognantha, sort of. DNA sequencing makes this sort of a designation kind of difficult to, well, ascertain. So instead of focusing on the pedantry of taxonomic nomenclature, I'm going to tell you about this specific species. First of all, if you see a whole bunch of them, they're great. They're not bad, and they're not doing anything to harm your soil or your plants. They're not vectors for disease either. They're actually a very good way you can tell that your soil is doing quite well and is not toxic. Like a lot of small crustaceans, these organisms are very sensitive to differences in soil and chemistry, so they're a very good indicator species of the health of soil. This particular footage was part of my strawberries patch, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of them, but they only come out at night. The soil composition of this footage is pretty much completely coffee grounds. These industrious detrivores are going to break down those coffee grounds and distribute it via, well, waste, like all detrivores do, like earthworms and similar creatures. One other important thing to note is that these creatures are parthenogenic, so they'll be making quite a lot of themselves, in short order too. I can think of another quickly reproducing organism that's about the same size that I would rather not have in my garden. Anyways, as I mentioned before, these organisms are very vulnerable to desiccation. They don't like light, and they're definitely not going to like heat. However, it was the only way I was able to show these creatures to you, so I apologize to them. I definitely made sure that I was able to bring as many as I could back to the strawberry patch. After all, they're beneficial. However, one cool thing to note is that these organisms came about around the Silurian time period, which is a pretty long time. So, despite these sort of weaknesses to the sun, to the heat, they seem to do pretty okay. It appears that in my fervor, I certainly seem to have, well, disturbed quite a few of these organisms. But despite their genetic variability, there are quite a few species that we just don't know yet. We've not been able to identify them, nor have we been able to classify them correctly. This is the definition of a cryptozoan, which is why I've titled this creature the insect that isn't, because for all intents and purposes, it's not. But it sure looks like one, doesn't it? Here you can see a decrease in heat changes the behavior of the organism quite rapidly, so it wasn't permanently damaged, which makes me feel quite a lot better. Oh, and before I forget, that red juicy looking stuff is strawberry. That's what I found these guys eating and inspired me to make this video. I was saving those strawberries for a very special person. Actually, this is more of a teaser video for this organism. I plan on making another video sometime in the future that goes into greater depth. Just like a lot of my videos, this is sort of a tiptoe through the tulips. I think this would be a very good time to point out that if you have any questions about this or other organisms, please ask me. It makes me feel justified going onto Wikipedia and Google and learning about all of this stuff day in and day out. If nobody asks questions, well, I don't really have a job. So we've again come to the end of the video and the beginning of this arthropod's mouth. With as abrupt an ending as I had a beginning, I bid you farewell. But before that, if you have any questions, please comment or message me. I will be happy to answer any of them, like I said before. If you have questions about other videos, you can definitely make a message or a comment there. I've also got a Facebook and a Tumblr and a Twitter, so really there's not very much of an excuse to not ask your questions. I suppose you've had enough springtail for one video. I'll see you soon. Obviously not literally, I'm speaking metaphorically.